My family called me. The family mistake. At my brother's engagement gala. One email exposed everything: runaway, broken engagement, barren, family mistake. The words burned across a 14-foot LED wall at my brother's engagement gala, while 260 guests laughed into crystal glasses and candlelight. My father lifted his champagne and said, "Don't be so dramatic, Naomi." My mother smiled the way women smile when they want to pretend cruelty is elegance. And my brother, the man everyone had gathered to celebrate that night, leaned into the microphone and said, "She always did know how to make everything about herself." I didn't cry. I didn't leave. I didn't give them the collapse they were waiting for. I reached into my clutch, unlocked my phone, opened a drafted email, and hit send. The subject line was only 2 words: or run it. 8 seconds later, the music cut out. The screen went black, and the entire room went so silent I could hear ice sliding down the inside of my mother's glass. What happened next didn't just ruin an engagement party. It cracked open 19 years of lies my family had built their name on. Before I tell you what happened, take a second to like and subscribe if you're into stories about family betrayal, public revenge, and the moment the truth finally walks into the room. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 37 years old, and to explain why one email could destroy a night like that, I have to take you back 5 weeks earlier to a Thursday night in Savannah, Georgia, when my phone rang and I saw a number from a town I had spent almost 20 years trying to forget. Then it was a little after 11. I was alone in my apartment with tracing paper spread across my dining table, a cold cup of tea by my elbow, and a half-finished set of elevations for the Belmore Opera Hall restoration. I'm a principal restoration designer. I take old buildings people overlook and try to return them to something strong enough to stand another 100 years. I've always thought there was something honest about that kind of work. You don't erase the damage. You reinforce what can still hold. My phone lit up with an unfamiliar Ashbourne area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. "Miss Carter?" a woman said. "My name is Marina Holt. I'm calling from Magnolia Pines Recovery Home. Your grandmother asked me to reach you." I sat up so quickly my chair scraped the floor. Grandmother June, 81 years old, when the only person in my family who had ever loved me without conditions, without strategy, without making me audition for it. Marina explained that my grandmother was scheduled for a complicated heart procedure in a few weeks. At her age, the doctors were optimistic but cautious. There were risks. She'd been asking for me, repeating my name, wanting to see me before surgery. I pressed my fingers against my forehead and shut my eyes. I hadn't seen my grandmother in 3 years, not because I didn't want to, because my father had made it nearly impossible. Then Marina's voice lowered. "There's more," she said. "Your father told the staff you may visit only if you attend your brother's engagement gala first." Of course he did. Everything with Douglas Carter came with a leash, even kindness, even access to an old woman lying in a care facility, even grief. "Miss Carter," Marina said after a pause, "your grandmother wanted me to warn you. She said your family is planning something for that night, something about you. She wanted you ready." I remember staring at the reflected glow of my laptop screen and feeling 2 things at once: rage and certainty. My family hadn't spoken to me in any meaningful way for years, and the first time they needed my presence, it wasn't because they missed me. It was because they wanted a target in the room. If you had asked anyone in Ashbourne who I was, they would have given you one of the same polished lies I'd lived under since I was 18. Naomi ran away. Naomi embarrassed her parents. Naomi threw her future away. Naomi always had a flair for chaos. In that town, my father's version of events became truth because he had money, he had friends, and he knew how to wear charm like a tailored suit. But the real story started 19 years earlier in my parents' dining room. The night Douglas Carter slid a folder across polished wood and told me to sign. I was 18. Ashbourne was one of those small Georgia towns where last names meant more than character, and church attendance could wash away almost anything if you smiled hard enough. My father sat at the head of the table with his reading glasses low on his nose, tapping a neat stack of papers with one finger. My mother, Elaine, was at the far end, flipping through a catalog and pretending not to listen. The papers were for a transfer of ownership, a 3.4-acre riverside lot on the edge of town, wild grass, a narrow bend in the water, or a stand of old cypress trees. My grandmother had transferred it to me the year before. Quietly, legally, privately. She'd looked me straight in the eye when she handed me the envelope and said, "This is yours, Naomi. One day you'll need something nobody can talk you out of." Now my father wanted it back, not because he needed a place to build a life, because he needed one stubborn piece of land to complete Redwood Square development, a commercial expansion he was desperate to close. "Your grandmother had no business doing this without consulting me," he said. "Sign it over." I didn't. I read every line. Then I set the pen down. No. It was one word, but it changed my life. 3 days later, my college fund vanished. I found out when I got a notice from the admissions office that my deposit had been reversed. 10 days after that, my father stood in the foyer with the front door open and told me if I walked out, I wouldn't be coming back. My mother didn't stop him. She adjusted a throw pillow and said nothing. My younger brother, Evan, stood halfway up the staircase, one hand on the banister, watching like he was at a play. I left with one duffel bag, $61 in my wallet, and the stupid, childish hope that somebody would call me before midnight and say this had gone too far. Nobody did. By the end of the week, Douglas Carter had told half of Ashbourne that I'd thrown away school, fallen in with the wrong man, and broken my mother's heart. It didn't matter that none of it was true. In a small town, authority sounds a lot like fact when enough people benefit from believing it. The first 11 nights after I left, and I slept in an old pickup behind a convenience store outside Macon. Then I moved from one cheap room to another, from the back shifts at a diner to a front counter at a gas station to late-night reception work in offices that smelled like bleach and stale coffee. I got my GED. I enrolled in community college. I transferred to a university program in historic preservation and restoration because, for reasons I didn't understand then, but understand now, I was drawn to damaged structures, places with broken facades and failing foundations that still had beauty left in them if someone cared enough to look. I graduated at 25. Nobody from my family came. No flowers, no card, no proud photo in a frame. Just me in a borrowed gown, a faculty handshake, and a quiet bus ride home. A few years later, I got engaged to a man named Caleb Mercer. And he was polished, connected, well-spoken, and on paper, he looked like safety. In private, he was control disguised as concern. He wanted my passwords, my schedule, my calendar, my clothing choices, my words softened, my opinions shortened, my ambitions translated into something more agreeable. He wasn't my father, but he rhymed with him. I broke the engagement at 31 and spent 6 months wondering whether surviving a relationship like that counted as strength or just another kind of failure. Then came the hospital stay, complications from a condition I'd ignored too long, surgery, recovery, a doctor delivering the kind of calm, professional sentence that rearranges a life in under 10 seconds. I would never carry a child. I sat alone in a recovery room and stared at the corner of a tissue box while the grief moved through me like weather. Somehow, my family found out. In Ashbourne, nothing vulnerable stayed private if it could be turned into gossip. And if it could be turned into shame, my family would always find a way. By 37, I had built a life they knew nothing about. I lived in Savannah in a brick apartment with high windows and too many plants. I owned my home. home.
Yeah.
I led preservation projects people actually cared about. My current project, Belmore Opera Hall, was the kind of commission that changes careers. A century-old theater with collapsed interior balconies, damaged plasterwork, and a history the city wanted restored instead of razed. I had a team that respected me, a name in my field. It's a Georgia Preservation Design Award framed near my desk. The truth was, I had built everything they'd once said I was incapable of building. I just never bothered sending my resume to the people who had decided years ago that my story ended at their front door. The morning after Marina called, I stood in my office kitchen staring at the coffee machine while my friend Adrian Wells watched me over the rim of his mug. Adrian and I had worked together years earlier on a museum retrofitting project, and somehow that professional overlap had turned into one of the most dependable friendships of my life. He knew enough about my family to hate them on principle. When I told him about the call, the surgery, the condition, and the warning, he leaned against the counter and listened without interrupting. Then he said, "You're going, and aren't you?" I nodded. She might not make it through the procedure. I'm not gambling with that. He looked at me for a second and said, "Then you don't go with hope. You go with a plan." 5 weeks before the gala, I drove back to Ashbourne for the first time in nearly a year. My parents' house looked exactly the way people who needed to be admired wanted a house to look. White shutters, fresh stonework, hydrangeas trimmed to obedience. The whole place was a performance of order. My mother opened the door, looked me up and down and said, "You still look tired." Not hello. Not, "It's been a while." That was Elaine Carter's gift. She could hide a blade inside concerns so neatly that anyone overhearing it would think she was being kind. At dinner, my father asked what I was doing these days in the same tone people use when they ask if a dog has learned any tricks. "Still doing interiors?" he asked. "I work in preservation design," I said. "So decorating old buildings," he replied, dismissing a career with one flick of his hand. Evan came in late, expensive watch, practiced smile, the kind of confidence that only grows in the greenhouse of parental favoritism. He was 34 then, golden son, future inheritor, centerpiece of every room my family entered. He was engaged to Sophie Langford, daughter of one of the most influential philanthropic families in the region. And the entire night was structured around making sure I understood my place relative to his. After dinner, Evan stopped me in the hallway. "Do me a favor at the gala," he said. "Wear something simple. Don't make yourself stand out. Sophie's family is very traditional." I looked at him. "So am I a guest or a liability?" He smiled without humor. "Depends how you act." Before I left, my mother handed me a garment bag. Inside was a dull gray dress with a shapeless waist and sleeves that made me look 10 years older. "This will photograph better than whatever you'd choose," she said. At the door, my father put a hand on my shoulder and lowered his voice. "You'll sit where you're placed. You'll keep conversation polite. You won't mention personal matters, and you will not embarrass this family."
I'm joking.
The absurdity of that instruction almost made me laugh. After 19 years of using me as their cautionary tale, suddenly I was responsible for their dignity. On the drive back to Savannah, one name kept circling in my mind: Langford. I knew it from somewhere other than Ashbourne Society pages and my brother's smug engagement. When I got home, I pulled up the Belmore Opera Hall file. There it was: Langford Civic Trust, lead funder, chairperson, Margaret Langford. My pulse slowed in that eerie way it does when a new pattern starts forming out of old information. Margaret Langford and I had exchanged dozens of emails, budget revisions, vision statements, design notes, and structural priorities over the past 8 months. She knew my work intimately. She knew my leadership on the project. She knew my problem solving, my deadlines, my proposals. She knew Naomi Carter, the professional. She had never seen my face in person. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. I didn't plan to use it. I didn't even know yet whether it would matter. But it was one more reminder that my family had no idea who I had become outside the frame they'd trapped me in. A week later, I got to see my grandmother. 20 supervised minutes. That was the condition. Magnolia pines smelled like antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. My mother sat in the hallway outside her room, scrolling through her phone, like she was waiting for a hair appointment instead of monitoring a reunion between a daughter and the only person who had ever protected her. Grandmother June looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were still bright. They sharpened the second she saw me. She reached for my hands before I even sat down. "Let me look at you," she said. She studied my face like she was reading a language everyone else had forgotten. "You're standing," she said softly. "That's enough." I smiled. And just like that, I was fighting tears. She didn't ask me for a performance. She didn't ask whether I'd made peace with anyone. She asked whether I was eating properly, whether my apartment still had the morning light I liked, whether I was sleeping. Then her grip tightened. "They're planning something for that party," she whispered. "Don't let them rewrite you again." She reached under her blanket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Marina must have helped her hide it. Inside was a copy of the Riverside property deed. My name still on it, clear, undeniable, untransferred, unchallenged. I looked from the paper back to her. "He never got it?" I asked. She shook her head. "He tried, he bluffed, he threatened. He told people what he needed to tell them. But no, Naomi, that land is yours. It always was." For 19 years. So I had assumed he'd found some loophole, some legal pressure point, some workaround after I left. He hadn't. He had simply lied. "He's still using it in conversations," she said quietly. "Still talking as though it's part of his development package." There it was. The second secret, under the first. Not only had my father exiled me for refusing to sign away what was mine, he'd spent nearly 2 decades pretending he owned it anyway. There was a knock at the door. My mother's voice. Time. I folded the deed carefully and slipped it inside my bag. Then my grandmother touched my wrist and said, "You don't owe them your silence, sweetheart." That sentence stayed with me all the way home. That night, Adrian came over with takeout and a notebook. I told him about the deed, the gala, the family warning, everything. He listened, then said, "Oh, do you know who's running their event production?" I didn't. He found out in 20 minutes. A local company from Augusta, short-staffed, hiring freelance support for lighting and projection. Adrian had done enough technical contracting over the years to sound legitimate in any room with a stage and a cable crate. By the end of the next day, he was on the call sheet for the gala. "I'm not starting anything," he told me. "I'm just making sure if they fire first, they don't control the screen. We built 7 slides together. Clean, factual, no insults, no cheap shots. A photo from my graduation, my licensure credentials, an image of me on site at Belmore, my award, a rendering from the Opera House restoration, the deeded outline of my own purchased home in Savannah, and a final black slide with white text. You called me a mistake. I rebuilt my life from what you tried to destroy." Adrian saved the deck to a drive, backed it up twice, and tested the transfer sequence in a mock setup. "How will I know?" he asked. I showed him the drafted email. Subject line, "Run it." "If they don't do anything, I never send it," I said. He studied me a moment. "You know they will." I knew. 4 days before the gala, Evan added me to a family group chat I hadn't asked to join. The messages were from him, my mother, and my father. Then came a video attachment labeled Family Tribute Preview. I watched it alone at my kitchen table with every light off but the stove hood. It started with elegant photos of Evan and Sophie, vineyard visits, yacht deck smiles, candlelit dinners. Then the tone shifted. Cartoon sound effect, glitch transition. My high school yearbook photo distorted to make my features look harder. A caption sliding in over my face, "Runaway." Then another image. This one grabbed from a social media account I hadn't used in years. Broken engagement. Then a stock illustration of an empty nursery, barren. Then the final card, family mistake. Underneath, Evan wrote, "Don't worry, it's all in fun." My mother replied, "Don't make it too crude." My father sent no objection at all. I took screenshots of every frame, every message, every timestamp, and forwarded them to Adrian with no commentary. Then I opened the slide deck and added one final line beneath my closing statement. A family reveals its character by how it treats the one it thinks has no power. I sat there staring at the words for a long time, not because I was unsure, because I was done pretending I still expected better. The gala night arrived under a clear spring sky that looked too pretty for what it was about to witness. St. Cecilia Chapel hosted the small religious blessing that afternoon, and the Hawthorne House handled the celebration afterward. Ashbourne had emptied itself into that venue. Business owners, charity board members, old family acquaintances, church women in tailored jackets, men who had golfed with my father for years, young couples pretending not to notice the hierarchy of the room while obsessing over it internally. I wore a deep blue dress with clean lines and a fitted waist, not flashy, not apologetic, certainly not the gray costume my mother had chosen for my disappearance. The hostess checked the chart and escorted me to table 18. Tucked beside a service corridor where waiters burst through every few minutes carrying trays of drinks and half-cleared plates. It was almost funny. Even the seating assignment was a message. Back corner, out of frame. Useful only as contrast. From there, I had a perfect view of the stage, the LED wall, and my family arranged in soft lighting near the center of the room. My father moved from group to group with the false humility of a man who loved being admired, but needed to pretend he found it inconvenient. My mother glided through conversations like a socialite in a perfume ad, smiling just enough to suggest intimacy without ever risking sincerity. Evan was impossible to miss. He wore his celebration like a crown. Sophie stood beside him, beautiful and composed, clearly trying to carry the evening with grace. Not yet fully understanding the people she had agreed to marry into. I watched her more than once glance toward my table with polite uncertainty, as if trying to match my face to some version of me she'd been told. I wondered what my family had said. Unstable, probably. Dramatic. Bitter. The usual words people use when a woman remembers what happened too clearly. At one point, my mother appeared beside my chair, the scent of her perfume arriving before her voice. "Please don't overdo it tonight," she murmured. "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning, don't talk too much. Don't drink too much. Don't draw attention." I looked up at her and said, "You invited me to a room with 260 people. Attention seems built in." Her smile twitched. "This is Evan's night." Then she moved away before I could answer. That was her way. Oh, deliver the wound and leave before anyone could see the blood. Dinner moved through its courses. Toasts began. Evan thanked my parents for their endless support, thanked the Langfords for welcoming him so warmly, thanked his friends, his future, the room, the venue, the staff, the chef, practically the silverware. A few laughs, a little applause. Then he lifted the microphone and said, "And I want to thank my sister Naomi for making the trip. I know family events are complicated for her." Scattered laughter. He smiled. "But she's here, and that's a start." There it was, the first public nick. Small enough to pass as teasing, sharp enough that I felt it land. Then the lights dimmed for the tribute reel. The first several minutes were exactly what everyone expected. Beautiful couple photos, childhood pictures of Evan. Family vacations where I appeared nowhere because those were taken after I left, and the ones before I left had long since been curated out of public view. Sophie's family smiled politely. Guests dabbed their mouths with napkins and turned toward the screen. The music shifted. Playful, a little too playful. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up. Calm. That was what shock had taught me over the years. When something truly terrible is about to happen, panic often gets replaced by clarity. The card on the screen read, "And now, the rest of the family." Evan glanced toward me and gave the tiniest wave. My old school photo appeared first, grainy, awkward, teenage. Underneath, runaway. Laughter moved across the room in a wave. Not everyone, but enough. Then a second image. Me at 23 outside a courthouse in a cheap coat. Heartbroken engagement. More laughter. A few people shifting in their seats now, sensing they were being invited into something meaner than they'd agreed to. Third image. A stock photo of a nursery with the mobile blurred out. Barren. My stomach didn't drop. It hardened. Fourth slide. A family portrait from years ago with my face circled in red. Family mistake. The room made a different sound at that one. Not quite laughter, not quite silence either. That ugly middle sound of people realizing a joke has become a public cruelty and not knowing whether their earlier amusement implicates them. Evan leaned into the mic. Okay, don't look so shocked. Naomi always says she can handle honesty. My father chuckled near the head table. She's sensitive, that's all. My mother swirled her wine and kept her eyes on me, hungry for the reaction. And they wanted collapse, tears, flight, a scene they could rebrand as proof of my instability. Instead, I lowered my gaze to my phone, opened the draft, and hit send. Run it. The reel froze. Someone near the back laughed, assuming it was a glitch. The screen blinked out. Evan frowned. "Hold on," he said into the mic. "Technical issue." Adrian was at the side booth in a black event polo, head bent over the control console as if troubleshooting. In reality, he had already switched the input. The room waited through one long, strange second, then another. Then the LED wall lit back up. Black background, white text. "This is Naomi Carter." The room changed temperature. I felt it. Conversations cut mid-breath. My father stood. "What is this?" he barked toward the booth. Adrian did not move. The first slide filled the screen. Me at graduation. Shoulders back, smile tired but real. Diploma in hand. Caption, "No one came. I went anyway." A murmur rose and died. Second slide. My professional credential and licensure. Principal restoration designer. Third. Me in a hard hat inside the shell of Belmore Opera Hall, pointing toward damaged trusses while my team looked on. Fourth. Georgia Preservation Design Award. Fifth. A restoration rendering from Belmore glowing in warm gold lighting, my project title beneath it. Sixth. The closing documents on the Savannah townhouse I bought by myself. Seventh. White letters on black. "You called me a mistake. I rebuilt my life from what you tried to destroy." Nobody laughed this time. I stood slowly from table 18. I didn't rush the stage. I didn't ask for a mic. My voice carried because silence had already done most of the work for me. "I did not run away," I said. "I was thrown out when I was 18 because I refused to sign away land my grandmother left me." My father took a step forward. "Sit down," he said. I kept going. I was not abandoned by some fiancé because I was broken. I ended a relationship with a controlling man because surviving someone like that is not failure. The room stayed still. "And barren," I said, turning my face fully toward the head table now, toward my brother, my mother, my father, all of them dressed in money and manners while rot sat under the fabric. That is not a joke. It is not a punchline. It is a private medical loss, and you put it on a 14-foot screen in front of 260 people. No one moved. Somewhere in the service corridor, a tray rattled against stainless steel and stopped. My mother found her voice first. "Naomi, please," she said sharply, as if I were the one ruining something. "You're humiliating yourself." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like her daughter. I felt like a witness. "No," I said. "For the first time, I'm not." Then Margaret Langford stood up. I recognized her immediately from her profile photograph on proposal calls, but in person she was even more composed. Silver hair pinned neatly, deep green dress, the kind of presence that doesn't need volume because everyone already understands its consequence. She walked away from the head table and stopped in the center of the room. half turned toward the screen, half turned toward me. "Naomi Carter," she said slowly, like fitting two identities together. "You're leading Belmore Opera Hall." "Yes," I said. Then she turned to my father. "The woman you just humiliated in front of this room is the preservation designer my trust selected for the most important cultural restoration we're funding this year." My father actually blinked, as if the concept itself were offensive. "I didn't know," he said. Margaret's expression barely changed. "No," she replied. "You didn't, because you never bothered to know your own daughter." That line moved through the crowd like a current. Evan jumped in then, voice high, defensive, suddenly less polished. "This is being twisted. Naomi's always had issues. She likes attention." Sophie stared at him, not with anger at first, with reevaluation. That was worse. My mother stepped toward Margaret with her society smile stretched tight across panic. "I'm sure this looks terrible out of context," she said. Margaret didn't even grant her the dignity of pretending confusion. "What context," she asked, "would make that screen acceptable?" Nobody answered. My father tried a different angle. Business. It was always business. "Margaret, let's not conflate family banter with professional matters," he said. "Redwood Square is still on track, and I'm sure once we all calm down—" "Redwood Square," Margaret repeated, and something in her tone told me she knew enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be finished. "You represented that land consolidation was complete." That was the moment. It wasn't rehearsed. I hadn't planned to use the deed unless I had to, but I had reached the point where silence felt less moral than truth. I opened my clutch, took out the folded copy, and stepped forward. "It isn't complete," I said. Every face turned. The Riverside parcel in the center section is still in my name. My father's face changed in an instant, not to public anger, but to private fear. I held the paper up, not theatrically, just enough. "My grandmother deeded it to me when I was 17. He tried to make me sign it over when I was 18. I refused. He threw me out, and he has been representing it as his ever since." The room made that same terrible middle sound again, but this time it was disbelief curdling into understanding. Margaret looked at the document, then at my father. "You intended to move forward on a development using land you do not own?" she asked. My father opened his mouth. "She was supposed to sign it. 19 years ago, I said. "When I was a teenager, I didn't. That should have been the end of it." Thomas Langford, who had been silent most of the evening, stood then and buttoned his jacket in one calm, unmistakable motion. "I think we're finished here," he said. Not loudly. He didn't need to be. Sophie stepped back from Evan like she needed physical distance to think. My brother reached for her hand. She did not take it. My mother's composure finally cracked. "This can't be happening," she whispered, not as grief, but as social horror. My father looked at me with raw fury and something else underneath it. Exposure. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough," Margaret said, and the word cut clean through his voice. Evan made one last attempt to reclaim the room. He moved toward the center with watery eyes and a shaking laugh, trying on victimhood the way he'd tried on every suit in his life. "This was supposed to be a joke," he said. "She does this, or she turns everything into drama." He gestured toward me, then toward the screen, then toward the room as if volume alone could restore his footing. "This is my engagement night." I looked at him and said evenly, "I didn't make the slideshow, Evan." "You did." Margaret turned her head slightly and said, "Which part was the joke? The medical humiliation or the fraud?" There was no way back after that. Chairs scraped. Guests who had been waiting for a social cue finally got one. A woman from my parents' church stood and left first, then a man who sat on one of my father's development boards, then an older couple from table 9, not all at once, just enough to change the room's center of gravity. Applause had died. Music had died. Even the servers looked embarrassed on behalf of the furniture. I didn't stay to gloat. That matters to me. Maybe not to everyone listening, but it matters to me. There's a difference between defending your dignity and becoming the thing that hurt you. I turned toward my family one last time. I came because Grandmother June asked for me, I said. Not because I wanted your approval, not because I wanted a seat at your table. I am done trying to earn basic respect in this family. My father didn't meet my eyes. My mother stared at the floor. Evan looked hollowed out, as if public shame had finally introduced him to a version of consequence he'd never had to know before. If you want me in your lives, I said, it starts with respect. If you can't manage that, then tonight is goodbye. Then I picked up my clutch and walked out. Adrian was waiting by the side entrance with 2 paper cups of coffee and the calm face of a man who had just watched a controlled demolition from a safe distance. He handed me one without asking whether I was okay. He knew I wasn't. Not yet. We got in his car because mine was blocked by catering vans, and for a while we just sat there in the dark with the engine running and the Hawthorne house glowing behind us like a chandelier someone forgot to turn off after a fire. People began leaving in clusters. No one looked celebratory. My phone buzzed. Marina. One of the aides had been watching a family live stream through a cousin's account, and somehow the video had made it to Magnolia Pines. Your grandmother saw enough, she texted. She's laughing, she said. That's my girl. I put my forehead against the cool window and finally let myself breathe. Over the next several days, Ashbourne did what small towns always do when a secret becomes useful. It spread. Quietly at first, then everywhere. A shaky clip of the LED screen made its way through local group chats. People who had been in the room began telling the story as if they had always known it was wrong. My mother was removed from a charity planning committee under the polite language of restructuring. My father lost 2 smaller development partners within 10 days. Redwood Square didn't disappear overnight. Men like Douglas Carter rarely fall all at once. But the gleam went off him. And in communities built on optics, a crack in image is sometimes more expensive than a crack in concrete. Sophie left Ashbourne with her parents the morning after the gala. A week later, I heard through someone who still knew someone who knew someone that the engagement was under review, which was the kindest Southern phrase for emotional evacuation I had ever heard. Evan texted me once. No apology, just a bitter paragraph about timing, embarrassment, and how I had destroyed an important night in his life. I read it once and did not respond. There are moments when silence is surrender. And there are moments when silence is simply refusing to re-enter a room that has already shown you what it is. My father called 3 weeks later. He didn't apologize either. He offered money for the Riverside lot. Name a figure, he said. Let's end this like adults. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at Savannah traffic moving in the evening light. You had 19 years to behave like an adult, I told him. The land isn't for sale. He exhaled hard. You're destroying this family over a piece of property. No, I said. You tried to destroy your daughter over a piece of property. This is just the part where everyone else found out. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he hung up. That was the last call. And the part that matters most to me? I saw my grandmother again. No conditions. No approval list games. No time visit with my mother sitting outside like a prison guard. Magnolia Pines added me directly as a family contact after the incident. Once enough, staff understood who I actually was in relation to her. Her surgery went well. Her recovery was slow, but she made it through. The first time I visited after the gala, she was sitting by the window with a knitted blanket over her knees and enough satisfaction in her face to power the building. Tell me everything I missed, she said. So I did. Not just the gala. My actual life, the work, the apartment, the mornings with coffee and blueprints, the Belmore Opera Hall presentation, the Savannah humidity, the bakery downstairs that burned cinnamon too often. She listened the way only people who truly love you can listen, not waiting to speak, not filing your story under useful or embarrassing, just receiving it. At one point, she squeezed my hand and said, "There you are." 3 words. That was all. But when a person has spent half her life being misnamed, being properly seen can feel like rescue. Belmore moved forward. Margaret Langford kept me on the project, and if anything, she became more decisive after what happened. Professional people value facts, and once the facts were visible, the rest was just paperwork and nerve. I presented the revised restoration plan a few months later with my own name on the title slide. Just Naomi Carter. Not a version of me softened for comfort. Not the caricature my family had preferred. Mine. So if you're listening to this and wondering whether I regret sending that email, whether I should have walked away, whether peace would have been nobler, here's what I'll say. Walking away can be noble when the room is merely cruel. But there are moments when silence becomes cooperation. There are moments when letting someone define you publicly, falsely, viciously, is not grace. It is surrendering your own record to people who have already proven they will weaponize it. That night, my family wanted me small, ashamed, and easy to dismiss. Instead, for the first time in 19 years, they had to face a version of me they could not control. I still have the Riverside lot. I haven't decided what I'll do with it. Some days I imagine a small house with a wide porch and enough shade for my grandmother to sit there if she ever wants to. Some days I imagine leaving it untouched for a while longer, just to prove that not everything has to be developed to be valuable. My mother sent one text months later. 2 words, "I'm sorry." No detail, no ownership, no explanation. I didn't answer. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. Healing doesn't require instant access for the people who cut you open. What I know is this. My family spent years calling me runaway, broken, barren, mistake. Some of those words pointed toward real pain, but none of them defined me. Pain is not identity. Loss is not identity. Being rejected by people who should have protected you is not identity. The only thing that changed my life was the day I stopped letting them narrate me. So now I want to ask you something. If you had been in that room, would you have sent the email? Would you have hit run it? Or would you have walked away? Put a 1 in the comments for send it or a 2 for walk away. And more important than that, tell me one boundary you need to set this week with someone who only knows how to love you when you stay small. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. There's another one coming, and trust me, it will make you rethink what family loyalty is supposed to cost. Thanks for being here. It means more than you know.